Welcome to Fancounters. My name's Nick. Thanks so much for being here. We just launched a brand new Instagram. We've been waiting forever to do this because I thought, Instagram's not going to catch on. Twitter's the future. Look, Twitter is dead. There's like nobody on Twitter. So we are off Twitter. I mean, we're still there, but I'm not going to promote it anymore. We are at Fancounters Live on Instagram. Go check out our brand new page. Help make us feel some love. Give us some followers and like some photos. I put up, it took me hours to put together all of the guests that we've had over these 130 some episodes, but they're all up there for you to check out. Go to Fancounters Live on Instagram. Subscribe to our page. Now, today's a great day because we have some brothers here, the Osmond brothers. No, not singers. Eric and Christian Osmond, sons of the late Ken Osmond, and it's Eric's birthday, no less. So happy birthday to you, Eric. We're really glad you guys are going to be on the show today. We also have Brian Nelson Jr. Brian, tell him about the Facebook group you run.
I run the new Leave It to Beaver / Still the Beaver fan page, and then also the Leave It to Beaver fan club.
Excellent. And now we had a wonderful opportunity. Obviously, on this show, Fancounters, we've been reuniting the cast of the new Leave It to Beaver. And we tracked down, well, I'll give you the credit. You tracked down Eric and Christian Osmond, who are the sons of Ken Osmond. We taped this interview a few weeks ago, so it was before the untimely passing of Ken, who we did know at that time was in poor health to where he wasn't able to interview with us because that was something that was on our mind. So it's really going to be, for the next hour, a wonderful tribute to Ken, to have his sons be able to talk about him in the present because he was alive when this interview happened, and just the wonderful memories they had with their dad. What do you think as listeners should be listening for as we go through this show today?
Obviously, we'll be talking to his sons. He was not only an iconic actor, but he was a family man. He was a father, a husband, and he was also a police officer, as many know, and he served his country in the Army Reserves. So there's a lot to Ken Osmond that we don't know, even though he's a legendary actor. I actually had the honor of meeting Ken. I was 12 years old at the time. They were sitting in for a radio station here in town. And then they had an autograph session at the end of the week for a fish fry. Huh. And I got to meet him, and along with Jerry Mathers. And it was a really good time. He was a really good guy. It was kind of cool because he was, I went to him first and had him sign. I had a book that he signed, and the book is long gone. It was lost, long gone. But he said, "Okay, Squirt, go over by that turkey over there and get his autograph." So yeah, Ken was a great guy, and I mean, you could tell in a lot of interviews that he's done, and any appearance that you've seen him, that he's, like Jerry often says, he was a very nice guy and a very genuine person.
Very much like the iconic character in which he played. When he played a wise guy, he was nice to your face and then would talk bad about you behind your back. My favorite line from Eddie Haskell from the new Leave to Beaver was, he'd say to June, "You're my favorite. I say that to fill in the blank, but I don't really mean it." It cracks me up every time. Yeah.
That was a new line that he got in that series.
Yep. And I still use it to this day. I'm like, "You're my favorite mother." I say that to my mother-in-law too, but I don't really mean it.
Yeah.
That's not true. No, both of you are my favorites.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not start a fight here.
Save.
Yeah, good, thanks. Anyway, one of the stories on this podcast today that resonated with me was my ability. I was able to ask the guys, what was it like the day that your dad was shot, and that infamous day when he was on patrol and he was chasing a criminal down an alleyway, and he thought the guy had gotten away, and in fact he was waiting for him and ended up shooting Ken Osmond. And we learned what Eric and Christian felt that day when they heard the news from their mom. That was kind of a pivotal point for me because it's always interesting to hear. You've heard Ken's story several times, but I don't think I've ever heard Eric and Christian talk about it, but they're going to do it on the show today.
Yes, and one more thing that I should say is, he was very humble about his character. He was grateful for the character. He always said that, Eddie was too good to him. He was very good to him, and a lot of doors were opened because of that character, and he really appreciated it.
All right, well, let's get to it. This is Christian and Eric Osmond, an interview that was taped a few weeks before Ken's death, and we're very honored to have both of them on the show, and especially now being able to air this episode for you as just a great tribute to a great man, Ken Osmond, who we lost in 2020.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Well, we've got a great treat for you today. Not only is Brian Nelson Jr. back with us from the new Leave It to Beaver and Still the Beaver Facebook page, but we've also tracked down, thanks to Brian, Eric Osmond and his brother Christian, who appeared on the show. So all of you, welcome to Fancounters.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We're very elusive and hard to track down.
It's amazing because some of you actually are elusive and hard to track down. So. Why don't we, just so we get the voices for those of us just listening to audio, Eric, if you could start us out, give us a little bit background about where you've been these last 30 years and what you've been doing, and then we'll have Christian do the same, just so our audience can get familiar with your voices.
Sure. Testing, Eric Osmond. So I graduated from film school in 93. I guess we wrapped up Beaver in about 89. Is that right? Yeah. And I graduated from USC Film School in 93 and found my way into editorial. That's where I am now. I work for Illumination Entertainment that did Secret Life of Pets and Despicable Me and Sing and that sort of thing. Been there for the last 8 years.
Excellent. And Christian, how about you?
I did the show kind of early high school. I think primarily when I was in ninth grade or so is when I did probably the most of the show, and kind of been fairly linear with my career path, and it had actually nothing to do with acting. It was basically going to veterinary school. So I've been a veterinarian for almost 2 decades now.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about what you've known from what we're doing so far. So we are kind of having a virtual cast reunion with all sorts of the cast of the new Leave It to Beaver. So we're glad that you both are here. Have you heard any of the updates from your other castmates, and what are your thoughts on what you've heard from them speaking so far?
Well, I think between the two of us, we've probably heard all of them, but I still have a couple outstanding, but I'm learning a lot. I learned that Kalina met Jimmy Stewart. I learned that Brian Levant saw Kip's grandma naked, and
these are important things to know.
Yeah, so it's been very informative.
Very good.
Yeah, I agree. It's fun to listen to everybody and get their backstories, and you always learn stuff every time you hear an interview, and it's pretty cool.
And you forget about stuff too. I'm sure I have far fewer memories than Brian Nelson Jr. has of the show. He seems to know everything, but we'll try.
But the beauty of being Eric is that he always has a camera going. So if you ever don't know exactly what happened, you can look at home movies and fill in any gaps.
Nice.
Well, he's going to do that. He wrote some great questions. I'm going to start out with the very first one that is on topic now. Eric, it seems like the new Leave It to Beaver was your one and only job as an actor. Christian, you probably as well. So was it your dad, Ken, who had you audition? Was there even an audition? How did you get cast in the show?
For me, there was this is Eric. There was an audition. My dad had said, hey, Brian Levant mentioned that you're about the right age for the character they're looking to cast as my son. Would you be interested in that? And I said, sure, why not? But there was a casting process, and it sounded similar to what Kip described, where we had to get through the echelons of the Universal people and then over to the Disney Channel, and then it's neck and neck, and you never know. But it was exciting because I wasn't planning on acting, but I sure enjoyed not having to go to school so much and hanging out on the lot and learning about filmmaking, which I didn't know existed as a career option. So yeah, it worked out well.
And Christian, how about you getting the role on the show?
I think I had it probably easier than Eric did. I think Eric's was the real deal audition. I'm sure we both probably had a little bit of an edge just by nature of being Ken's sons. But yeah, I don't recall having to jump through too many hoops. I think it was kind of, let's see how this goes, and it started off with just kind of random episodes here and there, and towards the end of the show I was getting written into more shows, and I think they're expanding the role a little bit. So yeah, like I said, I didn't really have to do sort of more typical cattle calls or auditions. It kind of fell into my lap.
And Brian Levant learned filmmaking from Gary Marshall. So I think Gary Marshall is super fond of nepotism and family working together and, going out on group softball trips and that sort of thing. So it didn't hurt that that's where he learned how to be sort of the camp counselor of the series, as it were.
Oh, yeah. And that whole entire, you weren't, you were the ones that were regulars on the show, but even, there was John's brother appeared on the show, Kalina's sister appeared on the show.
Yeah, that's right.
Even Tony's son played softball with you.
Christopher, yeah, it was nice having him around. He was cool guy to hang out with.
And Frank Bank's daughter was also on the show.
Yeah.
Once you were notified you had the role as Freddie, Eric, how did you prepare for a character? Did you ask your dad for any tips? Did you naturally know how to do the laugh?
No, it was a real long time ago, but if I remember for the movie of the week, there was only one line or two lines. So I probably worked like that forever with my dad until I had that, like a robot, probably too much like a robot. But then for the series, yeah, I remember working on the cackle with him because that sort of seemed to be like a signature piece. But primarily we'd work on dialogue. They had dialogue coaches. So you were either in school or you'd be running your lines with the dialogue coach. And, they had great dialogue coaches that came from Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. And so they were really great with the kids and they could, I think, really dial you in. So by the time you showed up on the set with the director, hopefully you were kind of ready for it. And it became more second nature as the show went on, but especially at the beginning, there'd be a lot of time with the dialogue coaches just to make you sound like a normal kid, I suppose.
Christian, when you appeared on the show, since Eric had already been on it, was there a lot of sibling rivalry going on because he kind of had the bigger role and you didn't? Did you care? Was that an issue?
I would say not. It wasn't like that as far as jealousy about his role in it. And I guess it's just probably not in my nature, but I was happy to start getting more and more involvement in it, mainly just because it was fun. It was just like a big fun focal point of life and unique experience. And so I would say no more rivalry than any other kids with an age gap. I remember when we went to Florida, he would always pull pranks and stuff on me that was, I don't know what one memory in particular. I remember him and John Snee were in the car in Florida and it was something like, can you go grab something? And then they were just toying with me and teasing me and just sort of driving away. And I was left running after them saying, come back, you jerk.
Okay. Thank you for
typical
repeating
kid
that.
stuff.
It did sort of seem like the studio thing was almost like a rite of passage because Dad had done it. His father was a carpenter and a prop maker for the studio. His mom was an agent. My mom's whole side was aerospace. So in the Valley in the 1950s and 60s, it was either aerospace or film. So we had both sides in our family and we became interested in both of them. But since Dad had grew up on the set, it kind of seemed like, oh, this is really cool. We get to experience a little bit of that. I was kind of almost sad that now, my two kids who are 22 and 21, they didn't have that. It's like, oh, they missed out of that part of childhood. But then I'm going, well, no, I guess that's not a totally normal part of childhood.
So Freddie, you had Eric. Freddie was your character. Freddie had a few on-screen kisses on the show. The first one was with when you were in the school play together.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was with the teenage mother. Well, she was 23 years old, but she was a teenage mother. The child was 5 or 6 years old.
And then the last one was the one where you and Kip went on a college interview, and you missed the interview. So you and Kip kind of switched roles in this episode, where he was the enticer. You were telling him what you should do, and he was telling him, well, let's party, let's have some fun. And so you meet these two college girls, and so I guess my question is how does on-screen kissing work with child actors?
Gosh, again, it's been a while, but I remember it being sort of awkward, but probably no more awkward than cantering on a horse in a suit of armor down, Colonial Street, or hanging upside down from a window with cables on your ankles. We had to do all kinds of weird things. So you just do them, and yeah, it's fine.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that was your first kiss, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably then thereabouts. Yeah, maybe.
Did you guys ever get a script where you read through it and thought, oh, this is super ridiculous, I can't believe they're making us do this, or something where you're just like, how am I going to get out of this? Or did you just go with the flow and be like, that's my job, this is what's in the script, we're going to do it?
For me, it was the latter. Like, I didn't ever have anything that was particularly weird or uncomfortable. I mean, they're just fun little scenarios, I guess, and all of them had their own unique sort of, I don't know, add-on side cool things about them, whether it was playing with fireworks or being dressed up in mob costume, or, there's all these different interesting things that went with each episode that was kind of cool and fun.
They would take the interests of whatever we were doing, and try to write those into the script. That's where the music stuff came from. And I think John Snee and I were pretty much into special effects makeup. We had a makeup artist there who would teach us stuff when we were between scenes. He'd show us how to put scars on our faces or cover up our eyeballs with spirit gum and Kleenex. And so, yeah, so they would, of course, write an episode where John is transformed into a werewolf, and, you get the teeth and the fur. And I do remember going to McDonald's in the werewolf costume. That was kind of fun.
Yeah.
Nice.
Very nice.
Is there an episode that you remember in particular, besides the werewolf one, that came from a situation in life at that time?
I think the music a little bit, since Kip was a performer, and since I was fiddling around with guitar at the time. I had played banjo because my dad was really into bluegrass. So I took up the banjo when he handed me a banjo at age 8. So played that for a few years with proper lessons and everything. But then, you turn 14 and you need to be cool, and the guitar is the cool instrument at the time. Of course,
right.
Now banjo is the cool instrument once you get into your 40s and 50s. But yeah, so I think they just tried to write into that. I mean, Kalina with her horses, that sort of thing found its way in.
Did you guys ever rehearse at home together? Did you ever talk about what happened at the studio at home? Was there anything that the three of you talked about?
I mean, I think you just talk about what was going on at your day at work, just like you would to any job. It might not necessarily be about a scene per se, but what happened in the office, or with the person, with your, with the teacher looking over your report or your essay, or whatever happened, whatever hijinks you were up to. But so yeah, you just talk about life, I suppose.
Did you have to shine his shoes at home, your dad?
It's really funny. I actually I'm cleaning out my dad's garage, and I found I must have built it out of wood. It's just 2 pieces of 2x4s painted blue, but it's a shoe shiner. So I don't remember ever having to shine his shoe, but I did come upon this shoe shiner. So it makes me wonder. I think not.
I remember a couple things going back to your other question. Like, I remember when I first was starting the role, like Dad coaching us about the Eddie Haskell cackle, and also did that sort of incessantly. And I also remember it wasn't unusual to where in the evenings Dad would run the lines, and we'd practice the next day's script. And I think obviously he wanted us to succeed and do a good job, and he wasn't over the top crazy, needing his boys to be stars type of a person, but I think he wanted to give us every opportunity to flourish and do well.
It was also much easier to memorize lines when you're 16 and 17. I think I'd read the script once and then I'd read it going from the school to the set, and then you just go for it. And Dad would always be annoyed in the evenings because I wouldn't be focusing as hard, but it sort of seemed to work. I can't do that now, but.
And the other thing that's funny, I remember Eric practicing his lines, or like something like in the car when you'd like run your lines by yourself. Like back then you were just looked at as crazy. Now everyone talks in the car without anyone in the car.
Yep, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Did you guys watch the original Leave It to Beaver to see your dad as a teenager?
Yeah. It was on, less so now, I guess, but back then it was on pretty regularly. And it was, I liked the show a lot. It was kind of strange. It didn't seem like, hey, that's Dad, because he didn't really look like the same dad to me. He just seemed like the kid on Leave It to Beaver who they claim is my father, but I took their word for it.
Yeah, I feel the same. Like, for me, it was always there. There was definitely no moment of, oh my gosh, Dad did this when he was a kid, and this is kind of a neat, big deal. It was just, that's just a thing that was always there. And I agree with Eric. Like, it's so weird. There's something maybe about hardwiring. Like, I had no facial recognition of Dad as the kid with my dad. Like, to me, they didn't look anything like each other. Yet at the same time, the other cast members, when I first met them and saw them, I was like, oh my gosh, they're exactly the same.
Yeah,
they're
that's
real.
true.
But I did not see that with Dad at all. Nothing.
That's true. And as far as like the uniqueness of that experience, it's more like just like, Grandma was a nurse, Grandpa worked at Lockheed, designed the doors on the L-1011, Dad was an actor. It was just like one kind of piece of family history, not like a more significant piece or anything. It was just another facet of our family history.
Do you find in your regular life, and I know that Eric, you work in the business, Christian does not, do people want to talk about your dad to you a lot? Or do they put that connection together? Do they think that you're Donnie and Marie's child or something?
Yeah, you get that question. You get that question a lot, Donnie and Marie.
Yeah.
Usually at work now, what happens is you work for somebody for like 3 or 4 months, and then it comes up, and then it's like just like the surprise. Cool, we get to talk about this now for a few minutes.
Okay.
Because they're it takes them out of left field, which I could imagine if I was like talking to somebody and then all of a sudden I found out their dad was like Greg Brady or something. I'd be oh, that's cool, that's weird. But
I had one really unique experience when I was I think I was a resident at the time, doing my surgical residency in North Carolina, and I was seeing a client and a patient, and the client was asking me, she's like, "You look really familiar. You don't happen to be related to Ken Osmond of Eddie Haskell, do you?" And I was like, "Yeah, he's my dad." And I was like, I'm sure someone put this person up to it, or they told him about it. Because I mean, a lot of people knew, but the client, and I believe her, like she swore to me, she's like, "No, I could see it in your face." And I was like, wow, that's never happened before, but it was really weird. I was like, that's amazing facial recognition to be able to recognize the offspring of a 50s actor in black and white.
Right.
But generally when most people say, "Are you related?" I usually say I'm related to N. Osmond, but I don't know if it's the one that you're thinking of, because I don't know if they're talking about Donnie and Marie, which
Right.
Usually Donnie and Marie is the first question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question that somebody really wants to know, and I don't want anybody to feel bad that I didn't ask their question, but the question that was going to lead into that is Mark Tracy says, what was the moment you realized that the Eddie Haskell you were watching was your father? Was there a pivotal moment you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, that is Dad? Or was there a weird moment like that? Or was it just kind of like what you said, it was a natural kind of thing that...
Or was it turned on at one point and your dad said, hey, or were you introduced as it like your dad worked on this, or was it just turned on?
No, because I mean, remember by the time we were born, it had already been on the air. And so there'd always be like little, hey, there's a t-shirt with Dad on it. There's a thing, even when you're 2 and 3 walking through the mall.
Yeah.
So it was just something that you kind of knew of.
It was just always there.
It wasn't revelatory as if it was introduced to you like when you were in your 30s and you didn't know beforehand. You just kind of grew up with it.
So yeah, our next question comes from Gary Greer. And we talked about this earlier. He's kind of wondering, there was a lot of music in the show. You and Kip were in a band and you played the guitar, and so Gary wants to know, he's a musician. He wants to know if you played guitar.
Yeah, not well at all. I still have a guitar and a banjo in the other room, but I don't find a lot of time to practice it. We did do dueling banjos over a Zoom call this week with me and somebody from work, but no, not a ton. I would practice. They would actually bring in somebody sort of proficient at guitar to try to teach me and get me through the one thing I kind of had to fake on the set, whatever particular number that was. I would try to master that thing. We had some blues one, I remember, that we were just riffing, and it was so dumb because it was like 7 or 8 notes, but I was able to get into the Songwriters Union because of it. So because I could plunk out those 8 notes, I was able to get into BMI. I don't think I did, but it's like, no. You know,
a gifted musician.
When you have nothing to put on a resume when you're trying to get into college, you put everything on. So I said, accepted into BMI music, you know, at 17.
Yeah, there you go. So one of my favorite episodes is Daydreaming. We were talking about a lot of music. There was a lot of choreography in that show. Was it hard to learn all that choreography?
Definitely for me, because I couldn't dance a lick. Kip took right to it. But again, with the choreographer, just like the guitar teacher, Eric, this is how you do it. You put your right foot over here and then you put one over here. But it's still very robotic and forced. But luckily, there were good editors to cut around that and make it seem not quite so terrible.
Well, Kip did that chubby checker hop. And, you know, that if anyone can master that, they can do just about any dance move.
Yeah, Kip could do it. Broadway trained thespian that he is.
Yeah.
We've been asking a lot of the cast members, because the season ended after 4 seasons, it kind of ended abruptly. What do you think would happen if the show returned? How do you think Freddie and Bomber would have evolved? Would they have joined Haskell Construction? Where would you project them being now?
Christian?
I think, what was that?
Well, we could just pretend that we're writers and we can just write something right now.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's make a good show.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think Bomber was definitely way too independent and against the grain to just follow in his father's footsteps. So there's no way he would just be a cog in Haskell Construction. Or I said Freddie, but I meant Bomber. I don't know. It's debatable on whether he'd be in prison, but that wouldn't make for a very interesting show.
Well, maybe he got reformed and he's done bombing buildings and stuff.
Maybe. He was definitely the more edgy of all of the Haskells, for sure. Like he pushed it a little bit more than the typical Haskell would, but I don't know. I still think that deep inside he was still a good person like all the Haskells, but it was maybe deeper down inside.
I think Eddie would probably have pushed Freddie to take over the family business so he could spend more time at the racetrack. There would probably be like, you know, Freddie trying to make it go more legit, or, you know, where's our social presence? Where's your Facebook presence? Trying to get him to do commercials as the founding father of Haskell Construction. I do remember that one commercial where he says, I'm Edward Haskell and I'm standing on my father's grave to prove a point. There'd probably be some of that, but in YouTube form.
Yeah. Only he would want you to make him look like a star.
Yeah. Perhaps. Thank goodness we had Brian Levant to write these episodes and Cindy Beagle.
So Nick just asked about, you know, the last season and how it ended. To a viewer, it seemed like it was going to go on. It kind of looked like, to me anyway, it looked like that there was going to be, Christian was going to kind of take over the quote unquote Eddie role, you know, and Freddie would have gone to college. Oliver would take over as the quote unquote Wally role. Troy Davidson, you know, Kevin would be the new Beaver role. And even in the last episode, Beaver was, well, he almost got married to his ex-wife, and then that gets messed up, which you guys were brilliant in. And I think Bomber, well, no, that was the graduation where he puts a smoke bomb in the audience. But were you surprised, I guess, if, you know, when it ended, or did you expect it to go on? Because we've seen interviews online that have said that they expected more episodes to be made.
From my perspective, it seems like there was always this tension around towards the end of the season, and is it going to get picked up? Is it going to get picked up? And it was like always like, in my mind, it was always like winning the lottery. Every time it's like, hey, we got another 13 episodes, or we're picked up for 2 more seasons this go around. And it was just like, celebratory for the family. I mean, it was fun, and it was like I said, it was just a good time. So every end of the season was uncertain as far as whether we were going to come back, is kind of my recollection. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I would agree. I seem to remember the wrap parties as feeling like real wrap parties because you never really knew. And then maybe 6 months later, you'd get a call, or 3 months later. I kind of remember the last season as feeling like the last season. I remember we moved to Orlando as kind of like a way to extend it out one more season somehow. I'm not sure what all the backstory was there. But the last season was definitely felt very different than all the previous, where we were on the Universal lot in LA. Yeah, the Universal lot in LA just had like a lot of history and was a fully functioning studio, and the one in Orlando was just a vacant lot at that time with 3 sound stages that was coming up to speed. So that definitely felt a lot more like camp. And I think I was 17 and was getting a car and then an apartment. So it felt like camp with a little bit of independence. So it was very different than, back at Universal.
Which, by the way, you had your own apartment down there when you were down there, didn't you?
I did. I think I remember that I started out with Dad in his apartment. I remember laying all things out on the bed and saying, "Bye, Mom, we're leaving for Orlando," randomly. And then I think it was when Kip left. I think I inherited his apartment, maybe.
Oh, okay. And Christian, how did that work for you? You were actually, you made quite a few appearances in the last season. How did that work for you? Did you stay down there, or did you stay in California and come and film?
Yeah, so the earlier episodes when it was done at Universal and in California, it was just very sporadic. When we did Florida, it was more the real deal. Like I moved there and pretty much just full-time school tutoring, and spent multiple months there and just lived with Dad. I mean, I was 2.5 years younger than Eric, so I was pretty young and, relatively speaking, to have an apartment or whatever. So I just stayed in a bedroom in Dad's apartment in Orlando and did our thing.
And I should say very good things about the school tutors. At least the ones we had were just awesome. They loved their kids so much. I had Miriam Richards was my studio teacher, who I just loved dearly. She'd come over to the house and she helped me write my essays to get into college. And she just was so caring and considerate. I've lost track of her, over the years, but we kept in touch afterwards. And I'd sure like to meet up with her again, but they were just swell.
Yeah, I share the same sentiment. It was a unique opportunity and very caring people. And it's a neat experience. Like most people don't have these opportunities, and it was really fun.
The trailers were not like, actor trailers with, all the amenities. They were just like little square boxes with an air conditioning and a couch, and that became your schoolroom. So you do everything you could to make it feel like home, and the teachers would go out of their way to make it feel like your home. I do remember being on the back lot of Universal where they had a portable school trailer, and I think all the kids shared that trailer, because on the cork board I remember seeing Soleil Moonfry wrote her name on the cork board, and
cool.
Like I forget of them all now, but all the kid actors, you'd see them sign this cork board sort of as a rite of passage.
That's cool.
You know what's really cool, when you were filming down there, and I know a guy that works for Universal. He actually worked for the show during the last season. His name's Mark Bradley. And he was a set builder.
Yeah.
And he worked. Now, Back to the Future said on one of their commentaries that Leave It to Beaver was filming on this lot somewhere the day we were filming or scouting or something. And I mentioned that to him, and he was like, that couldn't have been it, because this movie was out this time and the show was filming. You filmed there in 88? Did you start filming there in 88, or did you start filming there in 89?
No, I think 89, let's see, 88, 89 was Orlando, and any previous season would have been in LA.
Okay, so yeah, 88, 89. So you would have done some filming in 88 then, right?
I think so. I do know that they finally moved the Cleaver house out of its spot on Colonial Street to put up the house for the Burbs. And then it sat on Jack's behind the Psycho house for the longest time. I don't know if it's still there.
You know, there's a lot of controversy that's going around about the Cleaver house. You know, as you guys mentioned, I know quite a bit, and you know, but
not to toot my own horn, but you know,
but yeah, there's, you know, they're talking about the house. You know, this is the same house that was on Desperate Housewives or some housewife show, and I say that it is not, because if you look at it, I mean, as Mark Bradley will point out, that, I mean, this is, he and Brian clicked right away, because first thing Mark said to Brian was he brought him a little model of the house. He built the little house. And
he has that in his house, I think.
He does. As a matter of fact, I got a picture that he signed for me in his office. And and behind there, you can see he did, you know, there's a Wally Cleaver house, and there's a Beaver, you know, there's the Cleaver house. And I remember seeing that, and I showed that to Mark, and he's like, yeah, those are my houses there that I built. And so anyways, he pointed out to Brian that it doesn't make sense the way the show is shot. You know, like when you see a light on in the boys' bedroom, it's in the gable on the far right. But if you go up the stairs and the way everything is made, you know, what you're made to believe when they're going up the stairs, it's the other side of the house. Or the chimney. And this is what the giveaway is on which is the same house or not. Because the chimney in the exterior of the house would appear like it's in the middle of the den of the house. So if you look at the front of it. So this house that's being used now that people say they see on the lot is a different house. It might be the same skeleton, but it's redone because the chimney is on the side of the house.
Yeah.
You know, there's the fireplace and it's on the side of the house. It pretty much, I believe, it appears to be the same one that you see in the theatrical movie, if you want to call it that, in the 1997 movie that was done. The one that appeared in that. But there's also been reports that the real house has been like off somewhere. It's like disheveled and
in disrepair. Yeah.
That was the last time I saw disrepair behind the Psycho house. But maybe it's like when you remodel a house and you have to leave like one wall standing to call it a remodel. Maybe it's like that. Sure, yeah, that's the Cleaver house. Okay. I was on the CBS Radford lot at one point too. I think I've been to all the lots over the years, but CBS Radford, I think, has the house from the first season of Leave It to Beaver when it was on the other network. Not the new Leave It to Beaver, but the original one in the 50s when it was on the other network.
Yeah, season 1 and 2.
Yeah, I came around the corner. I'm like, gosh, that looks awfully familiar.
So yeah, we mentioned at the start of the show that you haven't done any acting since the show ended. Have you been interested in doing any acting of any sort?
I think I did a couple things around that time. I loved the acting and being on the studio lot and going to school, but I didn't like the auditioning part terribly much, where you had to drive all over town, you know, for usually not a great outcome, just like you had to go for 2 hours and do your thing and leave. And so I really liked film school because it seemed more solid and it seemed like you still got to do a lot of the things. So I think I did like some soap opera or something. I did a couple little things, but mostly no. I still get to do it a little bit with my current job as an editor because we're doing animation. And so we have to start with drawings and we have to turn it into the film before it becomes the film. So we have to have the music and we have to put in every footstep and sound effect and every little bit of dialogue. So usually I just, grab my mic and then, record the voices that I need for that spot, for whether it's a narrator. And sometimes they keep it. I did a McDonald's one last year and I think I did a Cinemark one. And some of the Illumination movies, they have me doing all the voices before they get Steve Carell or whoever does them to replace them, just because they need something to fill that space and make sure the story's working before they go out to the actors. And they take years to make anyway, so there's a lot of call for that.
Wow.
It was cool. Your dad did a McDonald's commercial in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Right after the show, I think it was like 91 or 92, he and Barbara Billingsley did a McDonald's spot. So that was cool.
I'm editing one right now, and that's why I stayed up so late last night. I really need to get through it this weekend.
A McDonald's commercial?
Yes, right now.
Oh, nice.
Well, before we move on from your years on the show, on Fancounters, we talk about your wild and crazy experiences that you may have had with your fans. So, thinking back to when you're a teenager on the show, do any weird, crazy, or fun fan encounters come to mind that you'll never forget?
That is so funny, fans.
He's got some. He's like, I don't know if I should tell this one or not. But that's the one we want to know.
No, you didn't get recognized. It was like a little cable show. It's like so flattering and strange that we're on this podcast. But I do remember driving to the McDonald's window with John Snee. I don't think he was in the werewolf costume this time.
Okay.
But we drove through the drive-thru and she says, "Hey, aren't you two kids from Leave It to Beaver?" And we said, "Yeah." And she said, "I thought so." And she closed the window. I went back to I don't know. That was it. That was our encounter. I don't know.
That's the best one you got?
That's the glory right there. That's the glory.
Oh, wow. Christian, how about you? Were you ever recognized for the show from teenage girls or anything?
Not really. I mean, I even had a significantly lesser role than Eric did. So, I mean, it was, every now and again you get a fan letter or something that's usually pretty nice and they're usually pretty flattering and fun. But no, it's mostly I got just kind of harassed in high school walking down the hallway because everyone would just sing the Leave It to Beaver theme in the background because they knew that your dad was on the show. And, it's like, okay, that was sort of fun for the first year of high school. Now let's move on. But it was fine.
Okay. But you didn't find anybody wanting to be friends with you because you were on a TV show or anything like that? No. I mean, it was pretty normal.
No, they just wanted to be friends with me because we're just really fun to be with. And,
good.
And really interesting. Yeah.
Plus, we had bigger stars in our school. I think Shannon Doherty was in my high school, and Christian, you had who went to your school?
Paul Walker.
Walker, yeah.
And you went to a dance with Shannon Doherty, Eric.
On the show, I did. Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, when she was on our show, I think her mom was asking about high schools, and I told her where I was going to go the following year, and so she went to my 9th grade. We had biology together. I think she was doing another show. She did one other show afterwards. I think with Wilford Brimley. Was it Our House or?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So in 9th grade, she was doing that, and I was still doing Beaver, but we both had regular high school together. I think they asked us both to leave that year because it was too much rigmarole to try to get assignments to us. I know they had to get a fax machine for the school, and
I think a lot of
school didn't have one.
Faxes were newfangled things back then, and that's how we would get our assignments. We'd fax them back and forth.
I think some of the teachers in high school were more amenable to the kind of the unusual circumstances than other. I remember I also went to grammar school with Mark Paul Gosselaar, and I distinctly remember like him sort of butting heads a little bit with some of the teachers there because they had to again go through some different hoops to get things done. And
they don't want to focus too much of their attention on one particular student at the disadvantage of all the other students. So I get the point. I had a great biology teacher, Ray Endicott. Christian, you loved Ray too.
Oh yeah,
but
bio was great.
He would record everything on microcassette, and you'd listen to that. And I guess that wasn't such a deal. He would just hit record, but it was one more thing he had to do.
And I remember he would say, "And Eric," and he'd make some specific.
Oh, that's
comments.
right.
That's fun. And you also conned him into conned
him into a student film at USC too. I blew up his head. Yeah, because remember the special effects, so we did the whole mask of his head, and then he filled that up.
He breathed through straws while he molded his head, and he fortunately didn't die during the process.
Yeah,
that's trust.
Yeah,
misplaced trust.
Right.
So since leaving acting, you become an accomplished editor, Eric. You worked on Scooby-Doo, Captain America, Thor, the Flintstones.
Sort of. Sort of. I didn't edit on the Marvel movies. They're very distinct jobs, like assistant editing, VFX editing is super like technical and databases and getting count sheets to the different VFX houses. And I did a lot of that. And for some reason, that's still the pathway to becoming an editor, is you have to do this first. And then the mindset of an editor is completely different. It's about rhythm and timing and pacing and story and emotion. And yet, in order to get to one, you still have to start at the other. So on the Marvel movies, I was, I think, a 3D editor, because they shoot those movies with one camera flat. And of course, at least back then, every 3D was a big thing back then. Mm-hmm. So they had to send every shot out to a place that would turn it into 3D. So that was kind of my job, is to make sure it all got turned into 3D with the help of a lot of very bright people writing programs to help me track shots and that sort of thing. Scooby-Doo was as an editor. That was with Brian Levant. I think we did 2 of those, Scooby-Doo and Curse of the Lake Monster. And then with Illumination, I've just been the marketing editor there for the last 8 years, which I love, because it used to be that you'd work job to job. You'd work on a film for as little as 5 days and as long as 2 years, but you never knew, and you never knew what the next one was going to be. So I found this home at Illumination on the marketing team, which I just love, because you're working with the directors and you're working with the storyboard artists and you're working on everything that isn't the movie. So it could be Super Bowl commercials or trailers or commercials for McDonald's, but it's super collaborative. Even during this pandemic, we still get on Zoom like twice a day, and we're sharing our screen and showing cuts and showing boards and showing drawings. And if you have a suggestion, you can bring it up, and the storyboard artist will go off and make that change and come back. And so you get to evolve the piece together, which I find super fun. It's also neat because they animate in Paris. So that means we work during the day and they're working at night. So the machine's going around the clock, and it sort of means you get to keep more reasonable hours most of the time too. Animation, that was the trick, animation. I didn't know that. I worked in live action for 20 years, but...
Well, that's kind of cool, and I'm sure that's done by design. You know, the way the clock works. You know, once you're done, then Paris goes. It's like the clock is forever going, and everyone's at like daytime mode.
Yeah.
Although when I talk to Eric, it sounds like he's pretty much going 24/7. He's working pretty hard.
Right at the moment, it goes in phases, but right at the moment, yeah.
Eric, I did wonder, when you're editing together a movie, now have you done it where you're picking the clips and putting them all together, or have you okay, yeah. So are you doing that at the direction of the director's notes, saying, you know, as they're filming, oh, okay, take 8A was the best, so use that one, or are you determining what take you think is the best?
To some extent, and I think every editor and every director works a little different, and everybody has their own system, but you pretty much do a first cut on your own. You try to do what you think is going to be the most interesting story. You figure out how much of an oddball take you want to use. If you find it super intriguing, but maybe it's going to off-put the director, on a first pass, what's the director's personality? Should you, shouldn't you? So it all depends on who you're working with and, your relationship with them. But it's very much an additive process. Like, I think most people think of editing as you just get rid of the bad stuff and there's the movie. And it's really much more additive. It's like, okay, how do I want to start this? Do I want to be on the person's reaction? Like, which is more important, the person saying the line or the person reacting to the line? If I cut to his hand fidgeting a little bit, is that going to tell a more important part of the story? So it's very nuanced and layered. And I think that's why I love it so much. And the different piece of music could totally change the feel of it. Where a scene is put in relation to another scene completely changes the way the story feels. So to me, it's like just the most exciting thing about filmmaking, because it's all the pieces at once. You still got cinematography, you still got writing, you're rewriting after the fact, but it's where it builds the fastest, in my opinion. Working for Brian, you'd sometimes be on a show for years in development, but by the time it's editorial, it's like, boom, you're going to be done in 2 months, and it's going to go from nothing to something in 2 months, and it's going to become a movie.
Yeah.
So I kind of just like it there. And it's air conditioned. When I was on the sets with Brian, sometimes you'd be doing snow scenes on Jingle All the Way, and you'd be on the back lot of Universal and it'd be 100 degrees. So I like the air conditioning too.
Oh, I bet. So did you get this interest in the editing and all that when you were working on the show as a kid? I mean, did you see all this stuff?
A little bit, but it was really hard to edit then. You only had like the 2 VCRs strung together, remember? You'd play one and you'd hit record on the other, and it'd have those weird color bars
on
every edit.
And they would like jitter and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get to hang out in the editing room on the Beaver set at all, but like that's when we started goofing around with the camcorder and making films in the hallway, John and Kalina and Kip and I. And there was actually a high school across the street, and they let us use their editing facilities. They had editing facilities at the high school. It was still tape to tape, but boy, they didn't make those weird wavy lines, and it was magical. I thought that, oh boy, this is the future.
Now, who owns those videos? Who's got the copies?
I have hours of that stuff because like the one rule as an editor is don't lose the film,
right?
Not one frame of it. So I digitized everything and I've got it all. It just sits on my computer. We were sort of like bloggers before we had a distribution mechanism. There was no internet. So we just taped and taped and taped. So yeah, I got that stuff tucked away.
Christian, did you always have a love for veterinary science and surgery? How did you pick that as your career?
Yeah, I went from probably in fourth grade thinking I'd like to be a farmer. And I think it was actually my dad's suggestion. He's like, he just always respected veterinarians. He always had a love of animals. And I actually remember driving in his truck to Badger Block one day. He was building something. And I remember him saying, that'd be a great profession, very noble. And you should think about that. And I was like, all right, that seems like a good idea. And I don't know, I just kind of was always on that path. And then as soon as I discovered that there was specialization, I just thought that once you're a vet, you're a vet, but it's very specialized. And as soon as I learned that there was such a thing as a surgeon, then I was like, oh, that's cool too. I'll do that. And just always kind of felt like the direction I would go. Even when people would interview me when we were doing the new Leave It to Beaver, people would say, you know, what do you want to do? And I'd be like, I want to be a veterinarian. Like it was just kind of the thing that I always kind of wanted to do.
Now, what's the largest animal you've performed a surgery on? Are we talking zoo animals or just everyday pets?
The biggest creature I've ever dealt with, I got to spay a lion as a resident. That was fun.
That's cool. Okay.
I think it's a very mechanical thing. I remember I was saying that my grandpa was in aerospace. We got into aviation after Beaver a little bit. We've been building a plane for 20 years, just about done. We both got pilot's licenses, and when we were building the airplane, you learn a lot of mechanical skills, and I think that applies to Christian surgery too. The tools he uses and the way you approach a bone, and
we call them instruments, but basically they're expensive tools.
So I have a question that we didn't really actually put down, but regarding, and this might take some thinking, Eric, because it was over 30 years ago, but the wrap party, you know, was that, you know, it showed some people, like there were people like sitting at tables. So I'm guessing this is like, you know, the way a wrap party would work if you're doing a wrap party after a season. So were these like family members that were out there? I remember seeing there was a clip where the little girl was doing like a funny face at the camera. And so I'm just wondering if there was like people there or if those were like extras just for effect.
No, it was our actual crew, and it was their families. I mean, sometimes we'd have them at bowling alleys, but yeah, that one was on a soundstage. I think it was a way for Brian to squeeze out one more episode in a season we may have been short one. Hopefully the crew members weren't too put off by it, but as I remember, it was still a nice party.
Frank always enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad was really good friends with Frank. They became the best of pals, especially in later years.
Yeah, they were best of buddies for sure. And Frank was a fun guy and really neat.
You know, and what's really, when you think about that, I mean, in the original show, they were like they were in real life later on in life, where they were always together.
Yeah.
You know, like I think I've heard interviews with your dad saying, you know, yeah, we'll be at a 7-Eleven or somewhere, and they'll say, oh yeah, you know, you're Eddie Haskell, and then I'll be like, you know who this guy is? And it's like, oh yeah, that's Lumpy. Now, but yeah, it's kind of cool to see. It's kind of cool to see the two different. You know, they just kind of hang out like best of buds. You know.
Yeah. Well, it's been said a lot on this podcast, but yeah, it was such a wonderful group of people. You know, from the writers to Brian to all the actors, they were just a bunch of nice people to hang out with. You wanted to.
Yeah.
The one thing that I picked up even before talking to anybody was that Brian was a fun type of guy. I mean, very much like a big kid. That's what I picked up, seeing other interviews and I mean, even you see him, the first time I ever saw him, obviously it was on that rap party episode. And yeah, even then he was, it was kind of weird because he was a little more business sense there, but you could still see he had a genuine love for the show as a fan, not just as a professional guy.
That's true. And he also has an excellent sense of comedy. He has a comedy lineage because he, like the people, when he worked on Happy Days, it was like Gary Marshall. Those writers, the old timers when Brian was coming up worked on like Sid Caesar. So it's this long line of comedy writers that one person inherits a little bit from the next to the next to the next. So I'm really happy I got to see a little bit of that.
Nice.
We do know that your dad was a police officer after the show, and he actually was shot in the line of duty. We've read a lot of articles about that, but getting a firsthand account of what that story was like for you guys might be interesting for the fans to hear. How did you hear about the incident, and what was the family's reaction? What did you guys think? How severe did you guys think it was?
Who's first?
Christian goes first.
All right. I mean, it was a weird time for sure, and definitely a scary time. And I think I was pretty young and didn't probably have a full grasp of everything, but I do remember late at night, and I just have a vision of Dad was all wrapped up, and we had sort of long hallways. And I remember Dad coming home. He had been released, and I remember just seeing him kind of walking, sort of stumbling a little bit down the hallway coming home, and it was a scary thing. And I remember going to school the next day and people asking me about my dad because they had heard on the news that he was shot, and he had a bulletproof vest that stopped. He was shot 3 times in one event, and his bulletproof vest stopped 2 of the bullets, and then his belt buckle stopped the 3rd bullet. Wow. So he has a belt buckle that literally has a U-shaped dent where the bullet had hit instead of getting into his body. It was scary, and it definitely, I think, traumatized him just emotionally being that close to one's demise. And it also allowed him to, I think, really gain his like love and affection for his partner at the time, Henry Lane, who he still loves dearly. That's again one of Dad's bestest of friends, and he just thinks he walks on water, and he does.
Yeah, he's visited Dad as recently as just a few months ago, and he lives in Idaho, so they keep in touch.
Eric, did you have any memories from that day or hearing about it or anything like that?
I remember exactly what my mom said. She said, "Your dad's okay, but he's been shot." So to me, that meant he's okay. That's what I heard, but he's been shot. So it's like, okay, now he'll need to get better, but he's okay.
Okay.
So I wasn't worried about his survival, I guess, because of the way Mom phrased it. But
that's good.
Yes, same thing. Asked about it in school and that sort of thing.
Excellent.
And I think Sonny came over that night or something like that. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah.
It's on Dad's book. I learned a lot about Dad from his book.
Really, the most clearest picture I've ever gotten from it is from Chris Lynch and my dad writing it in his book. It's
a really good book.
Actually, Dad's life is the most clear I've understood it in Dad's book because everything's chronological. You hear bits and pieces as you grow up, but this is like, it's an order.
A great plug for it. I learned so much about Dad from his book. It was fantastic. Every kid should have a book like that of their parents' history.
A primer.
Yeah, that's good. And it's very detailed. It's not skipping anything. So it's good. Guys, if you could just update us a little bit about, if you feel comfortable, your personal life. Are you guys married? Do you have kids? Are you both in the LA area? Where do you guys stand personally with your lives?
Christian.
Okay.
You always pass it to him.
I live in Carlsbad, California with my wife, Linda, and we have a dog, Piper, and a cat, Gray, and no human kids, just fuzzy ones. And yeah, that's what we're up to. And my wife is a professor at Western University, the veterinary school up there.
Okay.
So she's a veterinary internist.
Eric.
And I have 2 kids who are really swell kids who I love a lot. And the oldest is 22, and he's up in Washington in Redmond, going to school at DigiPen, where he's learning video game design. He's more the programmer type. I don't understand any of it because he's super smart, but he shows me sine waves and 3D audio and real-time processing. And I just go, but he's into like the math and the programming and the more like the engineering side. And my younger son, Ethan, is 21, just got engaged. He's been with the same girl for as long as, I don't know. As soon as he realized there was girls, there was this one girl. And he's going to school at Full Sail, and he's learning computer design, CG graphics, animation, kind of somewhat crossing over with me there. And I couldn't be prouder of both of them. And Mom's doing great. Try to visit her every weekend with Dad, pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
They're still local. And I'm engaged. My fiance, Kristen, and I just got a house in Woodland Hills. So a bit of a commute for my offices in Santa Monica, but she's really smart and funny, and I don't have a dog or a cat. So that's
Why go on?
So Christian comes over to well, you're 3 hours away, but if he does get there, he comes and visits the nephews, and when you get the time, you go visit the fuzzy nephews, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he's got a plane, so he can fly, and I pick him up in Burbank, and then we go over to Mom and Dad's house. That happens quite frequently.
Yeah, I was going probably about every week or every 2 weeks before the pandemic, and it's great. Like, it's a 43-minute flight from Palomar Airport to Burbank, and just go there and get picked up and visit the family for a few hours and go home. It's really quite nice.
So how long until that plane that you're building gets off the
It's
air?
almost done. It's almost done.
We've been saying that for 20 years, but it truly is almost done.
Well, so once it gets finished, one of you is going to have to, Eric, I guess, will have to do the filming of the...
Yeah, my license has lapsed. Christian's is nice and sharp. He can fly it. I'll film it.
So yeah, you can film the voyage.
Be good.
So where can fans find you on social media? Or do you have social media?
No,
not really.
We're staying hidden.
Although, like anything that I do that's interesting, my wife posts on her Facebook page. So it's I try to avoid it. It seems like more downside potential than upside potential.
And whenever I open Facebook, I think I got rid of it when they did that messenger thing and it confused me. So now when I open up Facebook, I've got like 5 years of happy birthdays. So I just close it again real quick.
Yeah. Well,
too much pressure.
I was mentioning Mark earlier. He works for Universal right now. He's working on getting something done, an article, I think he said, and he's interested in getting a hold of any of the child cast of this show to get information on what they remember, the 30th anniversary. That's what it was. It was 30th anniversary of moving to Florida.
I remember when we went out there was, I don't know, maybe Brian printed it out. It was just a vacant lot with a dumpster, and it said dump all, and it said, "Welcome to Universal Studios Florida," with the the font, because there was nothing there. So I still have that sweatshirt.
Well, that's what Kalina, when we talked to Kalina, she said, yeah, it was pretty desolate when it was pretty brand new. There was nothing there yet, but
yeah.
Then she was talking about all the antics that happened on wherever you did go. So
I still got the press. I still got the press kit from the opening. It came in like in a little film box, and it had the brochures of what it would one day look like. Here's what Jaws was going to look like.
Nice.
It was fun though. It was like there was nothing there, so like we used to I remember John Snee and us. We were into model rocketry, and so we just like ignite things in the back of the studio back when you could kind of do whatever you wanted because there really wasn't anything there. It was fun.
Well, guys, thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us, to reminisce with the memories and everything and all the stories. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us and wanting to talk about this. So that's cool.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for wanting to talk to us about it. And yeah, it was great to be able to get Christian on the call. We were able to do this virtual face-to-face. That was a cool idea.
Yeah, neat.
That's good. Thank you.
My thanks to Eric and Christian Osmond for joining us on the show this week. Very happy to reunite the brothers on our show. Get another cast member marked off our list. We've just got a few more to go. And in the coming weeks and months, hopefully, those cast members will also appear on the show. We do have another celebrity guest coming up next week. We hope you come back for that. In the meantime, stay safe this weekend, have fun, and join us every Friday right here. We're on your favorite podcasting app. We're here every Friday. We launch new episodes, so subscribe, give us a 5-star review. That does help us out. And if you have a guest that you want on the show, send an email to me at hello@fancounters.com. If I can get the guest on the show, I will involve you in the show, either by putting you on the phone with that person to ask your own questions, or I'll have you submit them ahead of time. But either way, it's going to be a fun time. We always enjoy having you along for the ride, and enjoy your weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.